What's up, everyone? Alex Rossman here, and welcome to Rossman Radio, the social first podcast where founders and industry leaders stop pretending everything's amazing and they tell the real stories, the wins, the failures, the why did I even start this moments, all of it. Most importantly, we break down the marketing strategies that are actually working for them today, not the ones some guru made up in a hotel conference room in 2016. So if you want real-world growth strategies told by the ones who have scaled multi-million-dollar brands, just listen.
Welcome to Rossman Radio, the show where marketers talk about what actually works. I'm Rob Nichols, Director of Strategy at Rossman Media. Today's guest is Andrew Mikowski from Gilson, a snowboard and ski company born from a science class experiment that grew into one of the most innovative direct-to-consumer brands in the outdoor space. We'll talk about what it's like to rebuild a factory business from scratch, how Gilson's artistic partnerships have flipped traditional creator model on its head, and what happens when a legacy industry collides with modern digital marketing. So let's get into it. Andrew, nice to have you on the show.
Yeah, excited to be here, Rob.
So give listeners the quick story. Two science teachers, a 3D base. What was the idea that started Gilson?
Great. So pleasure to be here, Rob. Yeah, the quick story is our founder, Nicholas Gilson, grew up in Rhode Island. He grew up building things, boats and surfboards and catamarans. And when he got into snowboarding, he thought to himself, why do snowboards have flat bases when everything else uses three-dimensional shapes and fluid dynamics? So he made his first snowboard in his parents' basement when he was 14 years old. Fast forward through college, he takes a position in Nashville, Tennessee as a science teacher, where he meets our now co-founder, Austin Royer. Together, they turn to hands-on learning with the classroom to emphasize science principles with the kids for things that they really were passionate about. So they revisited the idea Nick had when he was their age and said, hey, we're going to revisit this idea of a three-dimensionally based snowboard. A few failures later, they took this out to Colorado and people were just like, oh my goodness, I've never felt anything like this. Let's do it. Let's start a company. And they looked at their bank accounts and said, we have 2 years rent in Pennsylvania, where Austin grew up, in rural PA, or we have 2 months rent in Colorado, where, a normal place for a snowboard company to be based out of. So they made the move, hopped out to Pennsylvania, started the company, started building snowboards and skis literally in a donkey stable. They bought a CNC, their first CNC. It was sitting on half of the stable. We've got a donkey right next to it. And they started building snowboards. They got their first 20 together, bought a 1976 Airstream and packed them into the Airstream and just started driving around from mountain to mountain to meet with riders and get feedback. And that was how the company started, humble beginnings 13 years ago.
Nice. And now fast forward a little bit and you had a factory burned down. What was that moment like? And what did you learn from starting over a little bit?
Yeah, the early years of the company, growing out the initial factory, we kind of got to a point in November of 2022 that we looked around and we're kind of like, we're not that small anymore. You look around and we're shipping to, 50 countries around the world. There's 25 employees, and it was just really cool to see. And we're kind of like, we're doing this, right? And in the middle of the night, we got a phone call that the factory was on fire. By the time we got down there, it was darn near completely burned down at that time. I mean, it's a wood shop, so it went up and smoked pretty quickly. The silver lining, obviously, no one was hurt, happened in the middle of the night. And, we had that minute where it was like, my goodness, like what are we going to do from this? And then you have the opportunity to really, fires have been making way for new things in civilization for as long as humans have been around. And so we use this opportunity to really double down on the business and say, hey, we have a lot of awesome things going on here. Now let's take it to the next step. We were already kind of busting at the seams and went from a 6,000 square foot factory to a 50,000 square foot factory that we've been building out over the past 2 years. So it's just been super cool to build out an American manufacturing facility at a time when, that's not the most common thing, certainly in our industry, but probably in others as well. And it's just been fun to do that. Certainly with 10 years of experience manufacturing, at that point, you really understand best practices at this point of agile manufacturing and really building it out intentionally, as opposed to the first factory where it's kind of just figuring it out as we went,
Yeah, and I'm from Chicago, so we know a thing about fires, burning things down and starting over. I think I wanted to touch on that for one main reason, because you guys have a really strong foundation. You're a legacy brand who's been around a while, so like you said, you've learned a lot over the years and what works and what doesn't, and you built an audience. I wanted to talk a little bit about something else you built, which has been your sort of content creation factory. So I know you mentioned that you work with pros and ambassadors. How do you work with that group to produce high quality content to help promote the brand?
Yeah, good question. I think there's a couple different parts of our content strategy that we think are maybe a little bit unique. One of which, maybe I'll start. The first portion of it is what's really tied to our manufacturing. The fact that we own our manufacturing facility gives us a leg up of being super nimble. We're a rapid build manufacturing facility, so that allows us to build things that don't exist, and deliver in a made to order fashion. So someone comes on the website, buys a snowboard, we make it, ship it to them at their doorstep in less than 10 days. And that's kind of the way we've built out the company. And that allowed us to really be flexible on the aesthetic side of what we're building, graphics, and making sure that we're able to match product with the graphic that people really enjoy. And so, when we think about our content strategy, a big part of it has to do with the artwork and the artists that we work with. So whether that's a collaboration with a big brand like the New York Yankees or Sesame Street or Transformers, or it's a artist creator like Trippy Jaws or Rayco Design or Ollie Smither. And it really lets us tap into these smaller subset markets where there's an overlap between people who are passionate about snowboarding and skiing and people that are into a specific art style. And for the first time, really, folks that are riders, they don't have to choose between the border skis that's right for them functionally, right? That's best made to suit their ride style, and the graphic. Oftentimes that'd be a case with some of the legacy players where, they might like a graphic, but it's not on a board that's actually meant for them from a rider's perspective. So that model of working with artists has been a real unlock for us for the ability to get in front of new audiences. And that's been a really cool way to drive the content machine. We could also talk about, when you talk about we're in a really aesthetically pleasing industry, right? Snowboarding and skiing, hucking off of cliffs in the Alps and in Colorado. And certainly we have that as something that's wind at our sails, so to speak. But we've got 18 pro riders around the world. We have 200 brand ambassadors that are producing content, more UGC style content, and that's really what fuels our digital playbook, is the content that comes from our riders and our brand ambassadors. And it's just, they're out there having the time of their lives on products that we're making, and we're amplifying that to our own audience.
Yeah, I think you touched on something too with those artistic collaborations, because I feel like we deal with a lot of brands who want to capitalize on personalization, right? Everybody who's buying any kind of sports gear or clothing wants to reflect their personality. What you wear, whether you're on the slopes or on the street, is a reflection of what your own personality is. But there's a difference between mass-produced, designs that are imported from a different country, or that are just, not really truly identified or connected to any one artist, and art that's connected to a specific creator or a specific artist. How do you go about choosing which artists you collaborate with on your boards and your skis? What does that outreach program look like?
So you make a great point there, Rob, when you talk about into something that we found in the business, the space between, you've got on one side, you have mass production, right? Generally in big factories overseas. In our industry, 20,000 units at a time. And then you've got on the other end of the scale, you've got complete personalization, right? And there's some players that do, one-off customs, and we certainly do some custom snowboards and skis. But this section in the middle is really a place that we've both identified and doubled down on after the, feedback from the community. It's this semi-custom, right? This personalized, this limited edition subset of things. And that's really where this artist model fits in. So you definitely touched on that. And when you think about which artists we work with, it's kind of a mixture between, folks that we're seeing, whether we're seeing them on the normal places where our customers are shopping anyway, on TikTok and on Instagram, and we see art that we love and we say, wow, that is really cool. That would look super cool on a snowboard. Let's reach out and see if we can't get a collaboration going. That's probably half the time. And then, there's obviously, one of the underused methods in business is always referrals, right? So you're working with an artist that you do a great project with. Obviously, they know other artists, and a great question I asked is, who's another great artist that you know from the community that you think would be awesome to work with? That way you can kind of cut through. It's great to be in a position to be able to work with people you really like and say, hey, we don't need to work with anybody. It's a really fun industry. We try to treat everyone super fairly, and certainly a part of our model of how you build a structure that works like this is to compensate the artist properly. And I think that we've really pioneered that space. And it's nothing's better than writing a big check to an artist. I would do that all day long. I would far rather write a big check to a young artist that's taking that's making the choice to pursue their dreams and creativity. And I applaud that so much. I would far rather write that check than one to Mark Zuckerberg. Nothing against Meta. They're we've done a lot of work with them, obviously. But and then the other half is people that are just persistent, that say, hey, I've wanted to do a snowboard collaboration my whole life. How do I make this work? And whether they have 1 million followers or 1,000 followers, sometimes it's just that element of you put some thought into the message that you send to a company, or that the company sends to an individual, right? I think that just putting that thought, that's something that really comes across. I mean, I'm sure you get the same thing. You get DMs from people all over the world, and the ones that take time to send out a thoughtful message, we're going to take the time to send a thoughtful response. And I'm more likely to work with an artist that's unknown, but was really, you could tell that they're passionate. It's something that they want to do. And I think that comes across in their artwork as well.
Yeah. And, not to take it back to Zuckerberg, but I want to point out that, every year we do planning for our clients on, this is what we're talking about 2026, right? For the next year. We're talking about where brands should place their investments. And I always go through the meta studies because there's a lot of data, because it's still, while it may not be the most popular organic channel anymore, it's still the primary revenue driver for a lot of brands. And one thing caught my eye, and that was that it was something like 74% of consumers are more likely to make a purchase with a brand when they align with their own values. And it's not like, it doesn't have to be a very cause-based marketing. It's not like we're going to donate this many proceeds of what we're doing to a charity, although great, awesome. But like what you said about artists and about supporting and paying for artists, nobody wants to go out on a board that feels like they've ripped somebody off, or that is mass produced. I think it often goes unnoticed because it doesn't show up in the KPIs and it doesn't show up in the bottom line, that people want to wear and people want to use products that they don't feel ashamed of using, right? And it's it's something that should be a given, but I feel like it's not really talked about.
Yeah, Rob, great point. I think that today's consumer, and certainly the younger generation, I think I get the feeling that they are sometimes more mindful of how a product goes from whatever raw materials it started as to whatever they're actually using and ends up on their doorstep, and whose lives it touched in between, right? And we try to be as thoughtful as we can in that process, that everyone that touches it along the way has had a positive experience, that is paid fairly, that is compensated for the work that they're doing and not exploited, right? And I don't know that every supply chain can say that. And so whether that's anything from the shipping docks to the raw materials to the factories that it's happening in, I think that consumers give some thought about that. Certainly the up and coming generations.
100%. Now, when you were talking about your own marketing efforts, I know this is a marketing podcast, so I got to ask, what are your most effective digital channels right now? Let's start with maybe paid social. What's working for you, and what are you looking to expand?
Yeah, like most of your listeners, we've been around long enough to see the heydays of Meta and Facebook, when things were like gold rush and you couldn't make a bad ad, through the days when additional competition and stress coming from the platform side has reduced performance. So we've kind of been around for everything, and the current buckets, I mean, we're certainly putting big emphasis on organic social. I think that's something that's I don't think that's new to anybody, but it's had a resurgence over the past few years, and certainly something to double down on. I think that if I was looking at the channel mix, Meta is still very heavy, right, between Facebook and Instagram, particularly for our customers. And from a digital spend side, there's a good portion going that way. A new up and coming channel that we've rolled out is Snap, and we've found some pretty significant results there. And I get sometimes there's the analytics side, and sometimes there's the gut feeling side. And some of the gut feeling side says that we're reaching a significantly different audience on Snap than we are on Facebook, even though the demo tends to be somewhat similar, right? It skews a little younger, obviously, than Facebook, and certainly also somewhat than Instagram. But we're seeing great results there, and that's a fun platform to turn on. If we went next, the Google suite of products is probably receives the next bump of bulk of our ad dollars, followed by TikTok. So those four is where we place our biggest bets, and just the process of really being intentional about organic Facebook or organic digital, specifically on Instagram, has yielded great results for us, right? And I think one more thing I'd throw out there that we're probably a little less hesitant. In former years, I might have been a little bit more. We really have to curate every single post that we make. And I think that now it's more of a philosophy of just send it, right? It's like organic has become the place to just send it. And, some things work, some things don't, but I think it gives you the blueprint on what to double down on. And if I look back on like the difference in ad strategy over the last few years, I think that we've gone from a state of testing things inside the ad platform to now just testing on organic, right? Like we don't do any testing in the ad platform. We'll test on organic, and the winners are what's getting the dollars. But there's no more spending to figure out what's going to work on ad posts alone.
Yeah, that's a great point. We see the same thing. And I know that even on the ad channels, it's about creative. And we've been, we tell our clients, and we're being told by the channels to add more ads to our ad sets, because, with the new AI models and the algorithms, they learn faster for the audience, but they need more data to work with for the creative. So that means feeding that, some of that great content that you guys have.
Yeah, and multiple, I think like along those same lines, not being afraid to try many different things, right? Like iterations of going from carousels to videos to stills to short captions to long captions. It's kind of, they all find the audience that they're going to find. And I'm finding inside the ad platform in Meta that when you have enough examples of all of those different types of content mixed with the style of captioning, they're finding different audiences, and they're deploying in a really efficient manner.
Yep. If for anybody out there testing a Meta, our advice, the agency advice is to go broad with your targeting, but add a ton of creative and use the algorithms and use those to help find your audience if you're optimizing for purchases. On the other hand, you got TikTok. So TikTok right now, I know that for your price point, it's not the ideal candidate for a TikTok shop. We get a lot of people asking us about getting on TikTok shop, but somebody's not going to really casually buy a snowboard on TikTok shop. Maybe they will, but what it is good for is that top of funnel. Talk a little bit about your strategy on TikTok, how you're approaching things right now with reaching that audience.
Yeah, you got it. I think that's what we find in terms of, we keep in touch with plenty of other brands, and I certainly see the power of TikTok, but TikTok shop in general. And, I, in some senses, I envy the $50 and under products that are able to just sling on TikTok shop. It's really built beautifully when you think about the creator portal and the marketplace and kind of how they've set up TikTok shop. It's really well built. From a perspective of transacting commerce on it and really having the ecosystem for the creators in mind, right? And it is a smooth setup. I agree that we've yet to crack the nut on TikTok shop and being able to sell $700 snowboards through TikTok shop. I think it's easy to say, hey, no one buys that. And it might be right. And it might be a cop out, but what our strategy is using TikTok as a broader brand awareness platform, right? It's something that you can have videos go viral a little bit easier. You can get in front of maybe a different audience. And I think when you're not trying to sell on TikTok for a product like ours, we're probably getting the most benefit and bang for our buck when we're, featuring artist stories and fun video clips of people riding, enjoying the mountain lifestyle, educational content about how to do things as simple sometimes as putting their bindings on their snowboard. But I think, people are using it to either be entertained or educated on that platform, and for our product, probably not be sold to. And so that's where we're seeing the pockets of value.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I think that it's a one of a kind discovery engine right now, and we've got a lot of success with maybe not TikTok shop ads for this price point, but a lot of what we do is with TikTok search ads right now, where it's more intent driven. And because, your industry too is really so visual. I mean, like you said as soon as I'll like a couple videos and then my entire feed is just downhill, and it's really entertaining. I gotta say, it's really good stuff. And you guys do a great job with content. And I want to thank you again. This has been awesome. I really love how Gilson's story just kind of blends that, the creativity, supporting artists, and really adapted all of the modern channels. I'm intrigued by Snapchat. Now I gotta go revisit the channel for the agency. But everyone who's interested, check out gilsonsnow.com. That's GILSON snow.com to see their latest designs, their boards, follow their artist projects. Andrew, thanks so much again.
Thanks for having me, Rob.